Okay. If you guys will get out your worksheets that have the 20 polynomials on there, I want to give you a few tips and show you a cool thinking map that will help you figure out some of those problems. So this flow map, you're going to call it difference of squares or perfect square trinomial. So take out your pen. You're going to draw a box. And in the box, you're going to call it factor out a GCF. You're going to draw a leading arrow to the next box, and it's going to be binomial or trinomial. So you're probably wondering, why do we need this? Well, anytime you have a polynomial, you're going to look at every polynomial on the sheet. No matter what number it is, first step will always be factor out a GCF. If you can't factor out a GCF, move on to the next step. That's when you ask yourself, is it a binomial or a trinomial? If it's a binomial, that means it has how many terms? Two terms, that's right. So then we would go to this question 3. But if it had 3 terms, then it would be the
trinomial.
That's right, trinomial. So you would go to this question 3. All right, so let's say we're working with 2d squared minus 32. What's step 1?
Factor out the GCF.
Factor out a GCF. Do we have a GCF?
Yes, ma'am.
It's 2. So if we factor out the GCF, that means we're dividing everything by the GCF, which was 2. So what's left?
D squared minus 8.
D squared minus 16. Nice. Can you see that? Isn't what just D? Since we only factored out the 2, all we have left is the d squared. If we factored out a d also, then we'd only have a d left. So now we have 2 and d squared minus 16. What was our next step?
Binomial or trinomial?
So does this have 2 terms or 3 terms?
It has
2.
2 terms. So we're going to go to this top question.
Yeah.
It's a binomial. So the question is, does it have the form a squared minus b squared?
Yes, it does.
So we look at the binomial. Is this something squared?
Yes.
Yes. Is 16 something squared? Yeah, it's 4 squared. So we would go to the yes, which says the factors must be a plus b and a minus b. But where does the a and the b come from? Why is it a and b? How do we interpret that from here? Here's the formula. It was a squared minus b squared. So that first thing that's being squared is your a. So what's being squared here? D. So when we write out our factors, your a is d. For the b, it's going to be whatever that thing is that's being squared. So what's being squared here?
16.
8.
4.
4. 16 is 4 squared. So it's d plus 4 and d minus 4. Okay, that's one way that you can figure out if something is a difference of squares. And that would be your solution with your factors. Say we did an example where we had if you'll go to number 5 on your worksheet, 9x squared minus 24x plus 16. Okay, do we have a GCF? Well, we know there's not going to be a variable in the GCF because this last term doesn't even have a variable. What about the numbers?
3.
No, no GCF. 9 is made up of 3 and 3. 24 is 3 and 8, which is 4 and 2. And 16 just has a bunch of 2s. So they don't have any common factor. So we go on to step 2. Is it a binomial or a trinomial?
That's
Trinomial.
How do you know?
There's
3
parts.
parts.
All right, so we go down to question 3. Does it have the form a squared plus 2ab plus b squared? Let's find out. I always recommend you look at this term first and this term second. Is this something squared?
Yes.
Yes.
What can we square that will give us 9x squared?
3x.
3x. Don't forget that. What can we square that will give us 16?
4.
Yeah, just like the last one, 4. Now, the formula said if the middle term is double your a times your b, then it does fit this form. So here's our a, here's your b. When you multiply them together, what do you get? 12x. When you double that, what do you get? 24x. Now, this one has a negative 24x. So what change could we make?
You mean 4. You think both 4's negatives. So
Okay.
negative 4 times every 4.
Right, because if you take a 4 and square it, you get 16. If you take a negative 4 and square it, you still get a positive 16. So since we decided it can have that form, if this was negative, then your answer or the factors are just a plus b quantity squared. Remember, that means the same thing as this. So the 3x times 3x gives you 9x squared. Negative 4 times negative 4 gives you a positive 16. And then you'd have a negative 12x and a negative 12x. So you can use this flowchart anytime you want to try to see if something is a difference of squares or a perfect square trinomial. Thank you. You've been a great practice. 7 minutes, not bad.